In Kumasi, Ghana, Adissa loved her cousin Lami like a sister. She shared secrets, meals, and laughter, never doubting her loyalty. But one morning her life cracked open. Her bank account, once full, was empty, $3 million gone overnight. The truth cut deeper than the loss. It was Lami, the cousin she trusted most. When Adissa confronted her, Lami smiled and whispered, "We're family, so what's yours is ours." That single sentence felt like a knife. Adissa's heart broke, but she swallowed her anger. Outwardly she stayed calm, but inside she promised herself she would rise again. While Lami spent the money on new cars, designer bags, and a mansion in Accra, Adissa faced shame, creditors, and whispers in the community. Many thought she was finished. To survive, she quietly took a modest job at a private equity firm. No one noticed, but Adissa was learning. She watched how money flowed, how power moved, how fortunes grew. She wasn't sinking, she was sharpening her skills in silence. Years passed, and what Lami stole became Adissa's seed for success. With patience and smart investments, Adissa turned loss into $15 million. Her name began appearing in boardrooms, while Lami's debts grew like shadows. The mansion that once symbolized Lami's pride went up for auction, and Adissa walked in as the top bidder. Faces turned, whispers filled the hall, and Lami's eyes filled with horror. The house she bought with betrayal now belonged to the woman she had wronged. Adissa stood tall, her quiet revenge complete. Lami lived like a queen. She drove shiny new cars through the streets, wore the latest designer dresses, and showed off expensive handbags as if money grew on trees. Her mansion in Accra became a stage for parties where she laughed the loudest and made sure everyone knew she was rich. To the world, she looked untouchable, powerful, and blessed. But behind all that sparkle was a stolen fortune, and the person she had stolen from was suffering in silence. Adissa, on the other hand, faced the kind of humiliation that breaks many people. Creditors knocked on her door every week, demanding payment. Friends who once respected her avoided her, whispering about how she had lost everything. Family members looked at her with pity, and some even with blame. Each day felt heavier than the last, and her dignity seemed to slip away piece by piece. Yet Adissa carried herself with quiet strength. She did not scream, she did not beg. She chose patience. When nobody expected it, she accepted a small job at a private equity firm. People laughed behind her back. They thought she had fallen so low that she had no choice but to work in the shadows. But Adissa saw what no one else saw. The office became her school. She studied how money really moved in the world. She learned how powerful people invested, how companies rose and fell, and how wealth could grow quietly, almost invisibly. She listened more than she spoke, and every day she gathered lessons like seeds. What Lami never knew was that Adissa was not drowning. She was learning to swim in deeper waters. She was building herself again, this time on knowledge, discipline, and patience. While Lami chased attention and applause, Adissa chased wisdom and strategy. In the stillness of her long nights, she planned for a future no one could imagine. The more Lami bragged, the quieter Adissa became. But inside, the storm of her determination grew stronger. Each humiliation only pushed her to work harder. She promised herself that one day the same people who whispered about her fall would whisper about her rise. And when that day came, she would not need to shout or explain. Her success would speak louder than any revenge ever could. Adissa's journey from rock bottom was not glamorous. It was painful, slow, and lonely. Yet it was real. She discovered strength she never knew she had, and step by step, she was turning her pain into power. Unknown to everyone, especially Lami, Adissa was not broken. She was transforming, shaping herself into someone far greater than before. She was no longer the woman who lost $3 million. She was becoming the woman who would one day build much more and stand taller than anyone ever expected. 3 years passed, and life had changed in ways no one expected. Lamy was still showing off, but cracks were starting to appear in her glamorous life. What she never knew was that the very money she had stolen had quietly become the foundation of something much greater. Adissa had taken every lesson she learned at the private equity firm and used it wisely. She started small, investing carefully, watching the numbers grow little by little. What seemed like nothing at first soon became a fortune. The same $3 million that had been stolen from her turned into $15 million, built with patience and strategy. Adissa never bragged, never showed off. She stayed in the shadows, letting her success speak for her. She moved carefully, her name appearing quietly in boardrooms, investment deals, and companies that held real power. People who once pitied her now spoke her name with respect, often in hushed tones. She had entered a world Lamy could only dream about. While Lamy chased luxury brands and gossip, Adissa was sitting at tables where decisions shaped entire industries. The sweetest part was that Lamy had no idea. She was desperate to be accepted by the same wealthy circles where Adissa now moved silently. At parties, Lamy would brag about her mansion and her clothes, hoping to impress, not knowing that the woman truly admired in those rooms was her cousin, the one she betrayed. The irony was sharp. The cousin she had stolen from was now the very person standing behind the doors she wanted to open. Adissa never gloated. She simply smiled quietly when her name appeared in places Lamy longed to be. She remembered every insult, every laugh people had at her expense, but she carried them like medals of survival. Her silence was her greatest weapon, and her success was her loudest answer. The tables had turned in the most unexpected way. The thief who thought she had won was now sinking under the weight of her own greed, while the victim she tried to destroy had turned into a woman of power. Adissa had learned that real wealth wasn't about showing off cars or houses, it was about building a foundation no one could shake. Her fortune was not just money. It was respect, wisdom, and control. And the best part of it all was that it grew out of the very betrayal that once broke her heart. What was meant to destroy her had only made her stronger. The storm that started with tears ended with triumph. Now when Adissa walked into a boardroom, people stood to greet her. And somewhere far away, Lamy was still fighting to be noticed, not knowing that the cousin she had called weak was the very one holding the keys to the world she desperately wanted to enter. The twist of fortune had arrived, and it was only the beginning. Lamy thought her good life would never end. She had grown used to waking up in silk sheets, stepping into shiny cars, and throwing parties where champagne never stopped flowing. But little by little, the walls of her perfect world began to crack. The bills kept piling up, and no amount of pretending could hide them. The mansion that once made her feel like a queen soon became a heavy chain around her neck. The banks came knocking, warning her that if she could not pay, the house would be taken away. For the first time, Lamy felt fear creeping in, the kind of fear money could no longer cover. Her husband, once proud to be at her side, grew tired of the endless drama. He had believed in the image of wealth, but when the debts grew louder than the parties, he packed his bags and walked away. Lamy begged him to stay, but his silence was colder than any insult. She watched him leave, and with him went the last piece of stability she had left. The woman who once flaunted her fortune was now alone in an empty mansion that was slipping from her grip. Whispers spread quickly through the community. The same people who used to clap for her, who used to envy her lifestyle, now shook their heads in pity. Some even mocked her downfall, calling it karma. Others avoided her completely, afraid her troubles might stain their own reputations. The allies she once bragged to, people she showered with gifts and used to impress, slowly turned their backs. Doors that once opened wide at her arrival now slammed shut before she could step inside. Lamy tried everything to hold on. She went from house to house, knocking on doors of old friends, begging for help. She promised to pay back favors, swore that she would rise again if only someone gave her a chance. But no one trusted her anymore. They remembered how proudly she once looked down on others, how she boasted that she would never need anyone. Now, as she begged, they looked at her with the same coldness she once showed them. The loneliness grew heavier than the deaths. Nights were the hardest. She lay awake in a mansion that felt like a prison, haunted by the thought that the very house she worshipped would soon be taken away. Every corner reminded her of the choices she had made, the lies she told, and the cousin she betrayed. The same money that once made her feel powerful had cursed her, dragging her down into a pit she could not climb out of. Lami's world, built on stolen fortune and pride, was collapsing before her eyes. She had run out of time, run out of friends, and run out of excuses. The woman who once thought she owned everything was now left with nothing but shame, regret, and the sound of doors closing in her face. The day of the auction arrived, and the air was heavy with curiosity and gossip. People filled the hall, whispering about the once glamorous mansion that was now on sale. For many, it was just another property to bid on, but for Adissa, it was far more than that. She entered the room quietly, her head held high, not with shame but with calm confidence. Years ago she had been the woman everyone pitied, the cousin who lost everything. Now she was walking in as the strongest bidder, though no one expected to see her there. The auctioneer began with his booming voice, listing the details of the mansion. The crowd buzzed with excitement, and one by one, bidders raised their paddles. Lami was also present, hiding at the back, her face pale and her hands trembling. She could not believe the house she once called her pride was now being sold to the highest bidder. Every word from the auctioneer felt like a knife cutting into her. Then the moment came. A familiar name echoed through the hall. Adissa. The sound silenced the room instantly. Heads turned, eyes widened, and whispers ran like fire through the crowd. Nobody had expected her to show up, let alone bid. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. She simply raised her paddle with quiet certainty. Lami froze, her heart racing as she realized what was happening. The bids climbed higher, but Adissa never backed down. She was steady, calm, and unshaken. Each time another bidder tried, she responded without hesitation. Her confidence alone was enough to scare others out of the race. Slowly, the competition thinned until only her bid remained. The auctioneer slammed the gavel and announced, "Sold." The room erupted in murmurs, and all eyes locked on Adissa. She had just bought the mansion, the very house Lami had stolen to build her false kingdom. Lami's knees felt weak. She clutched the edge of her chair, unable to breathe. The mansion she had worshipped, the mansion she bragged about, the mansion she built her reputation on, now belonged to the cousin she betrayed. It was cruel irony written right in front of her eyes. Adissa didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to deliver the message. The crowd could not stop whispering. Some were shocked, others were impressed. They remembered the old story of betrayal, the fall of Adissa, and now they were watching her rise in the most dramatic way possible. The once broken woman had just claimed victory in silence. As Adissa left the hall, the papers of ownership in her hand, her steps were calm and graceful. She didn't boast, she didn't shout. She knew the power of silence. For her, this was not just buying a house. This was justice, this was closure, and this was proof that no betrayal could keep her down forever. The silent auction had become the loudest victory of her life. That evening, the whole extended family gathered in the big sitting room, the air thick with tension. News had traveled fast. Everyone knew Adissa had bought back the mansion that once belonged to Lami, and whispers of the shocking auction were still fresh on every tongue. The elders sat in the center, their faces stern, while cousins, uncles, and aunties filled every corner of the room. Some looked uneasy, others curious. All eyes shifted between Adissa, calm and collected, and Lami, broken and trembling. Lami was not the woman she once was. Gone was the cousin who strutted around in diamonds and luxury. That night, she knelt on the floor with her face streaked with tears, her pride shattered. She wept openly, her voice shaking as she begged Adissa for forgiveness. "Please," she cried, "we are family. Blood is stronger than anything. Forget the past. Help me. Her words echoed in the silence, but her desperation only made the room heavier. The elders turned to Odissa, their voices soft, almost pleading. They reminded her of the bond of blood, of the importance of unity, of how family must stay together no matter what. Odissa, one elder said, forgive your cousin. What is wealth compared to family? Let the past be the past. Their eyes searched her face for mercy, but Odissa remained still, her expression unreadable. Finally, she rose to her feet, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Her voice was steady, sharp, and clear as it cut through the air. She called it family when she stole from me. Today, I call it justice. Her words struck like thunder. The room froze, and even the elders, who had spoken with such authority moments before, fell silent. Nobody could respond. The truth was too heavy, and her voice carried a power that silenced every attempt at excuse. Lami sobbed harder, reaching out toward Odissa, but Odissa did not move. She stood tall, her presence unshaken, as if years of pain and betrayal had built an armor no tears could break. For the first time, the family saw not the victim of theft, but a woman of strength who refused to let betrayal hide behind the mask of blood ties. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of Lami's cries. Some family members shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their eyes, realizing the weight of Odissa's words. It was not cruelty, it was truth. And the truth had finally been spoken aloud. When Odissa turned to leave, she did not look back. Her footsteps echoed with finality, and everyone in the room knew a line had been drawn. This was not just about money or a house. It was about respect, justice, and dignity. That night, the family showdown ended not with reconciliation, but with a new understanding. Betrayal has a price, and Odissa had made sure it was paid in full. The cruelest twist of fate came only weeks later. Lami, once the proud owner of the mansion she had flaunted before the world, now had nowhere to sleep. The debts had swallowed everything she owned, friends had abandoned her, and family members who once clapped for her success now pretended not to see her. With her pride crushed and her spirit broken, she dragged herself to the one place she once believed she would never have to beg for, her old mansion. The night was quiet when she stood at the tall gates, her clothes wrinkled, her face pale, and her eyes swollen from endless crying. She hesitated for a long time, her hands trembling as she reached out to knock. Each tap on the heavy door reminded her of the countless times she had opened it proudly to show off her wealth. Now she stood outside like a stranger. When the door finally opened, she found herself staring into the eyes of Odissa. Odissa stood tall and calm, with her little daughter holding her hand. The child looked up at Lami with innocent curiosity, not fully understanding the storm that hung in the air. Lami's lips quivered, but no words came out at first. All the arrogance she once carried had vanished. She lowered her head, ashamed, and finally whispered, "Please. I have nowhere else to go." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Odissa looked at her cousin, the same woman who had once stolen from her, laughed at her pain, and lived off her suffering. Yet she felt no anger now, only a cold, quiet strength. A slow smile curved across her lips as she spoke words Lami would never forget, "Welcome home, but you're only a guest now." The statement hit harder than any slap. Lami's heart sank as the reality of her fall became clear. This was no longer her house, no longer her throne. She was just a guest, dependent on the mercy of the very woman she had betrayed. The power she once boasted about was gone, flipped completely in Odissa's favor. Inside, the mansion looked even more beautiful than she remembered, but it no longer belonged to her. Every polished floor, every glowing light, every corner of the house screamed of her loss and Odissa's triumph. She walked through the doorway with heavy steps, each one echoing her shame. Odissa didn't raise her voice or mock her. She didn't need to. Her calmness, her quiet smile, and the sight of her standing there with her daughter spoke louder than any insult ever could. The balance had shifted forever. For Lamy, it was the cruelest irony. She had stolen 3 million to buy this house, only to lose it all and return as a beggar at its door. And for Edessa, it was the sweetest justice, victory without revenge, power without cruelty, dignity reclaimed in silence. Edessa's victory was more than just buying back a house. It was the moment she reclaimed her dignity, her power, and her voice. What was once a painful story of betrayal had turned into a legend that people would whisper about for years. The same community that once pitied her now looked at her with respect, even awe. She had shown them that true strength wasn't loud or flashy, it was quiet, patient, and unshakable. Lamy, on the other hand, became a shadow of the woman she once was. She had no home, no husband, no friends to lean on. The mansion she had once bragged about became the crown jewel of her cousin's triumph. Every time people passed by its tall gates, they remembered the story, how greed destroyed one woman and how resilience lifted the other higher than anyone imagined. Edessa never rubbed it in, never shouted about her success. She didn't need to. Her life itself was the proof. She carried herself with grace, and the silence of her victory was louder than any revenge speech could ever be. To many, she became an example of endurance, of how betrayal could be turned into fuel for greatness. In the end, Lamy had nowhere to turn, no hand to hold, no roof to claim. And Edessa, the woman once humiliated and robbed, had the last laugh, not through cruelty, but through living well. The community kept her story alive, retelling it again and again, the cousin who lost 3 million and returned as the rightful owner of the thief's mansion. It was the perfect ending, like a mic drop, reminding everyone that justice always comes, even if it takes time.